Oh, just a reminder, again, you 100% need a video camera in 1 week and 3 days. If you do not have a camera in 1 week and 3 days, you won't be able to present. If you can't present, you cannot complete. Okay? Okay, 2 people can't record. I allowed, okay, hold on. I'll record. I'll record. Okay. Okay, so it should be fixed. Which means most of you probably have cameras right now since no one's saying anything. And even though I'm asking you to turn on your cameras, you're still not, which makes me feel like you're just choosing to not do what I ask you to do. Okay. So, exercise 2. So, and yeah, it's okay. Okay, so exercise 2. We're building on our existing application for exercise 1. So we can clone this from here. I don't know how many, if any of you cloned it. I do wonder if you were able to clone it. If you clone this, you should have no problem doing an npm install. That's actually one of the whole ideas behind Node Package Manager or any of these module or library things, is that we can actually share it with each other and just run npm install and it will just work, right? Obviously cloning it or copying it from the file system on your computer might not always work, but in most cases it does. That might be a Mac thing. I'm not exactly sure why. I'd have to double check on the Mac copy command. I'm pretty sure copies all files, all recursive, all files recursively, including hidden files, but I might be wrong about that. All right, so we're going to make a directory, and well, I guess I don't need to because I'm going to git clone this. Okay, and that goes into React restaurants. Number 1. Okay, so this is the first exercise solution, I guess. Okay, now we're going to open this with VS Code first, and then we're going to npm start the server and get it going. We're going to do a lot of little changes here. Ooh. Oh, npm install. Can't start the server if you don't npm install, because there's nothing to start. And we'll just sit here for a couple minutes while this installs. How are you enjoying React so far? Do you find it difficult? Yeah. It's got a lot of little things that are different. It's very different. These are all very different. If you think, oh, I bet you Angular is worse or better, I bet you Vue is worse or better. They're all different and difficult to start with. But like I said, people spend their entire life here. And remember, this is just an introductory course. We're not looking to come out the other side in a week being experts in this, right? But you'll be exposed to it and have an idea of how it works. Hopefully you'll keep up with it because it goes pretty deep and there's a lot of really cool things you can do. Like I said, you can make a career out of it. You can pretty much stop your schooling right now after this course and just go out and make a career as a front-end developer. Don't do that though. You paid for 12 months. one more
What
day.
kind of job do you prefer?
Well, I was a full stack developer, and I hated JavaScript before this. Like JavaScript for me was just I was just a guy who used it as a tool. I didn't really know it very well. And now and so when I applied for this job, I applied for both front end and back end instructor. Like they had two postings, and I applied for both because I thought, yeah, like I'm a full stack developer, I would be perfect for both. And then they're like, oh no, but you can't do both because we're running two courses alternating, so you can only do one. So we're going to put you in the front end because we need someone right now. And back end happens 5 months later. So that gives us 5 more months to find someone. So I said, okay. And then after doing JavaScript, so I had to learn JavaScript really, really well because I had to teach it. And after doing it and learning it a lot better, I like it. You kind of just learn to like whatever you do. There's benefits and drawbacks to anything. The cool thing about JavaScript is that the ecosystem is so big and everything in the end is just JavaScript. So like this React, it's just JavaScript. It's got some weird stuff on top of it, but it's just JavaScript. And so because the ecosystem is so big with JavaScript, you can do anything, literally anything. You can program your computer, you can program the web, you can program tiny microcontrollers with it because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. So I kind of like it now, but I do miss Ruby a lot because Ruby is pretty nice as a language, really nice as a language. Okay, so we're installed. That took, it wasn't too bad, 1 minute and 46 seconds. Okay. That's reasonable.
And you said you were jealous. You're only 17.
I know. Was that 17 seconds behind you?
Yeah, 17 seconds shy. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Still though, this is you have a gaming laptop, and this is an Ultrabook with a teeny tiny. It's a Core i7, but the processor's not very strong because it's a very thin laptop. I kind of wish I got something a little bit beefier, but
is that the one that school provided you?
Yeah, they asked me what I wanted, and I watch a lot of laptop videos, and I said, this one. And then I got it, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so tiny. Like, it's way tinier than I would have expected, but I can't say anything because I'm the one who asked for it.
Yeah.
So, so I'm going to happily use it. It's nice. It's beautiful, but it's just, I feel like it's a little bit on the weak side because it is a 13-inch. Laptop, and so the small form factor doesn't allow for a lot of good internal cooling. So without good cooling, you can't put a really strong processor in it. It's an i7, but it's a really low gigahertz. I think it's like 1.4.
It's probably even like under throttled or something just because of the
and the fan goes on all the time because as soon as it has to do any sort of workload, it's got to fire up those fans because it just doesn't have any good cooling. And then I try my desktop, which it's a desktop, right? And so even it's a 5-year-old processor and it still beats the crap out of this. If anyone wants to talk hardware, I'm always up for it, except I don't know anything about video cards. Okay, so here's what we're building. So yesterday, the main concept was components. Right, we're building components and we're passing props. So props, again, reminder, props are kind of like those arguments or parameters into components. Components are kind of like other classes. It's a way of our applications into smaller pieces. And we want to break up our apps into smaller pieces because it's actually way easier to manage, easier to reason about, right? For us, easier to design with and easier to reuse components, right? That's one of the things that we like to do as software developers is reuse code. But when we create code that we talked about this yesterday, sorry, I'm just going to stop my sharing for a second so you can see me. When we create code that has a lot of dependencies on each other, or something, another way of describing it is something called tight coupling, right? Where the code cannot really be separated from the application because there's a lot of specific application code in there, right? That's tightly coupled. And if, as programmers, we like to reuse things. So think of the random number generator function that I've given you. And I gave it to you a long time ago, and we've reused it over and over and over again. And there was no code within that random number generator function that was actually tied to any specific application. Now, if you took some of that random number generator code and put it into a function in one of your apps, you probably just couldn't take that function out and reuse it. But because we separated it, laser focused its functionality on doing one thing, generate a random number. Don't care about anything else that's going on around you. Generate a random number, return that int, right? Now we can reuse that code because it's not coupled, it's not dependent on anything else in that application. And that's what we like to try to do in programming, is as much as possible, we want to follow that tenet, because maintenance of code, reuse of code is just much easier. Okay. And again, we don't get that domino effect that occurs if we make one change, everything else, it affects everything else, because ideally we have all these independent components, right? Unlike a car, like imagine if you could open the hood of your car and the person at the store, at the car shop, the mechanic says, oh, you need a new air conditioner. And you're like, okay, well, that would be awesome if you could just go to Walmart and pick up an air conditioner unit, and you just go open the hood of your car, pull out a box that contains the air conditioner unit, and put in a new box that contains a new air conditioner unit, and it just fits in and works. But no, cars are tightly coupled, right? Everything's connected, and so we can't do that. But that's what we want to be able to create, right? Is a program where we can just take one piece out and replace it with another piece without having to worry about everything else that's connected, right? So that's what in React, that's what components are able to provide to us. I mean, not completely. There's always, I feel like there's always a little certain amount of coupling. It's not non-coupled or uncoupled. It's loosely coupled, right? So lightly, a little bit, okay? So that is one of the reasons why we build things with components, okay? And again, props are a way of sending information down. So we are going to create a header component, a main app component, restaurant component, and footer component. We're going to start with the header component and footer component first. Okay, actually, we already have the main app component, right? Because that is this one right here. Yeah. We're going to delete a couple things first, just because I like to have it clean. Okay. Good. All right. So this is our starting point. We have our restaurants, okay, in our const variable here, restaurants, and we're returning a map with all the restaurants, and we get that restaurant. We get this, right? This is our output. We want to create components out of this. We want to put a header at the top, a footer at the bottom, okay? So we're going to go ahead and create components out of that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create, actually, I think there's a couple ways to do this. I think if you import, let me see if VS Code is awesome like this. And I say header from header.js. And then I right click, header is declared, but its value is never read. Quick fix. No, okay. So it's not like the JavaScript thing where it says, hey, it doesn't exist. You want me to create it? And again, I know there's plugins that we can do that will just automatically create new components. But again, at this point, at this point, it's really important that we're into the typing phase. Okay, because we have to get some muscle memory in our fingers. So we're going to create a new file. Again, if you don't want to do it from here, you can always do it from here. Okay. If curious, Control Z pauses a task. Okay, so I paused this, Control Z. Okay, and I think it's F. You can then say BG, and now it's running in the background. So I paused it and I pushed it to the background. So now I have access to my thing and it's still running. So it's still running. Okay. FG brings it back to the foreground. So now it's running again. So now I can kill it in case you're ever interested. You can also do all this stuff from here, right? You don't have to do it from within your VS Code, obviously. Okay. So we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it, header.js. And we'll create another one, 2 new files while we're here, footer.js. We'll also create JavaScript file or CSS files for them. Header, CSS, and new file, footer.css. One of the things you should see or you should know at this point is that all the file names except for index.js are uppercase. Have you noticed that they start with an uppercase letter? That is not a requirement, that is a convention. Okay, and that is a convention I expect you to follow. Okay, when you start to see this, and this is something that I didn't mention, but I hope you saw and I hope you started following the pattern. And that's the type of patterns, those are the types of patterns that you're going to see in the real world, and those are the types of patterns that like maybe no one will tell you until you screw it up, right? But so you should be paying attention to these things and try to follow. When you see stuff happening, don't just like do your own thing, follow the pattern, okay?
I think I mentioned it in the reading even.
Probably, I read the readings again, but I don't remember if it mentioned it.
No, I think it was capitalizing functions for whatchamacallit.
Oh, these functions for functional components?
Yes, for components, yeah.
These are pretty much, like if you think about it, these are a function, constructor functions, right? These are the same thing as constructor functions. Remember constructor functions when we were doing prototypal inheritance? Capitals, that's pretty much the same thing. That's what these are. Okay, so the first thing, like I said, we're going to do, we're going to add a header. So we can do that right here in this return. Header. Okay, and footer. Now, again, we can only return one value back to this with children, but instead we're returning 1, 2, 3 siblings. So we have to give it a parent. So we can give it a little fragment here, a blank fragment. Okay. An empty fragment. So this is not a div, it's not nothing, it's nothing. It's just, it's kind of it's called a fragment. It's just an empty wrapper, okay, that wraps this. So we can then return these things, okay? So we have a header and a footer. Now, this is gonna break because there's no content in my header and my footer. In addition, I'm not even importing footer. Footer right now is totally invalid. So first thing is, I gotta import that. Second thing is I gotta create those, okay? Because they're empty. So we're going to, it's not, so it's not uncommon for me to do something like this, but you have to be very cautious when you're doing this. Okay, because now I have to go change things. Well, first of all, I don't need these two, right? I'm in header right now. I'm in the header file. I don't need to import myself from here. and I don't need to access footer from here. You only import the things you need to access, or the things you need to use. If I don't need to use footer, I don't need to import footer. Simple as that. And because inside header, I am not using footer, I don't need to import footer. But I do need to import footer.css. I do need to write a function, footer, and then export default footer. Alternatively, you might see this occasionally, especially in a functional component, right before the function itself. Oh, thank you. Okay, right before the function itself. That's fine. Okay, and all we're going to do here, again, remember we're returning a piece of JSX, and actually we could just return, let's just make it an H1, or let's make it a header tag. With an H1 in it. Okay. That works. And actually this could have just been this. If we're going to be awesome about it. Do we need a name? Oh no, we need a name for it. Right, okay. Or do we? I wonder if we can do this. Let's find out. We're in header. We're in header anyways, and I called it footer, so that's a problem. And let's try the same thing for footer. Except down here, it's not header, it's footer. And we'll put an H2. Okay. Content is not very important here. Hi, little Willie. Okay, now we don't really, again, content's not very important here. That's not really the focus. The focus is getting familiar with the syntax, getting familiar with the stuff. I'm playing around with this. I'm putting an arrow function here just to test. I want to see what's going to happen. Do we need to give it a capital F for footer function if it's export defaults? I don't know. Let's find out. It's this one, I think. Let's see. Looks like it's got some problems, but running it here, image elements. Okay, so we have a header. We have our app here. We have our header. We have our restaurant. So we have our footer. Something doesn't look very happy here. I'm just gonna test this out by deleting these. I delete these and it starts working. Okay, so that's good. Hey, yeah, okay, so cool, that works. That works. I don't know why I had to refresh, but that's fine. So this style here also works. The arrow function style, if you're only returning one thing. So it is literally just a functional component. Okay, but you won't see that very much, ever. I've never seen that before. So just, you know, take it with a grain of salt. More of a, can I do this than should you do this? Yes, you can. Should you? Probably not. Okay, so we're gonna do that export default header. And why are you upset with me?
Rapid function.
Thank you. Yeah.
Function.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So we'll do that, and we'll pop over here. We'll do the same thing. There we go. Okay. And we need our key prop, which we'll manage over here in a bit. Okay. All right, so we have our main component, our app component. We have our header component. We have our footer component. We don't need to pass any props through to those. However, you could if you wanted to, no big deal. Okay. And we also are going to create our restaurant component. So the last one, new file, we're going to say restaurant. .js and new file resto.css, and we're going to create again another component. Okay, this time I'm going to make my component a class component, a stateful component. Okay, so we're going to say class. And I'm just choosing to do this as demonstration purposes. It provides no additional value in this case. Class restaurant export extends React component. And then we have to have a render function. So render. And then we have to do a, yes. Return. Oh yeah, sorry. I thought someone said John. And then we're doing a return, okay? And this here, we have to return JSX. Okay, now you'll just see I wrote this as an arrow function instead of a function, and that's totally fine, okay? Okay, so now we're returning. Sorry, I'm just thinking for a second. Yeah, okay, that's fine. And now we're returning some JSX, and our JSX is essentially going to be this chunk here, the inner part, okay? Not the map part. We still want to loop over the restaurants in the above component. Remember, this is a singular restaurant, not a list of restaurants, okay? A singular restaurant. So we're only going to take the singular restaurant information. Now I've got a little bit more information that I want to pass through. So I'm going to update that object, okay? And paste it here, the updated object information. Boop. Okay. And now I have a little bit more information that I want to provide. So I just deleted that chunk here and here. I still want to do this map. Okay. I don't necessarily need to return because I'm going to do something kind of clever with the arrow function. I'm going to make this a one-liner. Okay. And then I'm going to manage this after. So I'm going to take care of this first. Okay. So I'm going to map over the current restaurants, which are these ones up here. Okay. So we're mapping over those. We're iterating through them. And remember, map returns an array. And this is going to be an array of JSX elements or an array of component elements, which are JSX, right? That's what we're building. So we're building restaurant components, right? Restaurant components, and we're going to pass through props. Now these props are going to be, I'm just going to pass one prop through, and that's going to be the restaurant itself equals, and we're going to pass through this. There's a lot of restaurant word here. Restaurants, restaurant, 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 restaurant. What can you do, right? That will get rid of this. And actually, we can clean this up a little bit. And that, and there we go. Okay, so we're passing through this, we're passing this component to map. So what this will generate is an array of restaurant component elements that one for each restaurant itself, right? So we're going to end up with an array of 10 restaurant components, which will render very nicely in JSX, okay? Now we need to fix this on the other side. So we're passing through the data from restaurant. So we're passing through all of this stuff, okay? And we need to now accept that. So automatically, when we use the class type for components instead of the function type, we automatically get access to props when we use the function style for a stateless functional component. So if I would have done this, restaurant, right, with the return inside, and I'm doing JSX in here, I would have had to accept props in as a parameter. But because we're doing this style, I don't need to accept props in as parameters. The props automatically come in through.
Hey, John.
This. Yes.
Just a quick question while we're on the functional components. Is props just an arbitrary name that we're passing, or we can name it anything, right?
Yep, you can call it anything.
Okay, yeah. I just wasn't sure because I've only seen props used, so I wasn't sure if it was like a hard rule.
It's not, it's a convention though, because if you call it something else, people will be like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand what this person's doing. Oh, this is props, right? Yeah. No, not requirement, but it's convention.
Okay.
So we have access to this props automatically in here, okay? Because of the way that we're extending React component. So we're going to create our LIs. Okay, so we're rendering, we're going to return an LI with an image. Each LI should have its own key. That's the other thing that we're missing, key equals. And do we have anything that we can use for a key here? Not really. And so that's the really shitty thing, is that we don't have an ID. We can, like, you really want to create some sort of ID for each of these. Ideally, we would have put an ID on here. Usually there's going to be something, but in this case there isn't. So let's just make something up. Let's say, it's got to be, so it has to be, it cannot be an object. It has to be a string or a number. I checked on this yesterday. We can't use the object as the unique identifier. So let's just use the image URL. That seems pretty unique. I don't know. Let's just use the name. It doesn't really matter for this example, but in real life, it does really matter. So this .props .name. Okay. Then we're going to have this .props .image. Sorry. This .props.restaurant.name.restaurant.image, right? Because I'm passing it in restaurant. So it's going to be this .props restaurant, not this .props, because we can pass in more things. That's the thing. We're, in this case, like I showed you yesterday, we can pass in multiple things. Here I'm only passing in one thing, but yesterday I was passing in name, cuisines, cost, image, and then I said, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. I'm only going to pass in one thing, because that's, if I'm passing in everything, I might as well just pass in one object. Okay, restaurant.name. I think yesterday, the way I did this, that I demonstrated this for the solution, was I did a UL, and then I did a bunch of LIs in here. One for each thing. So I got it broken down. Yeah, so I did an image, put an image in there, the name, and the next one, this .props.restaurant.name. Oh, and the really cool thing about this too is you can do this, if you copied over a restaurant from somewhere else or a really complicated component, you could say restaurant equals this.props.restaurant. And then all those places where I have to replace restaurant.name, restaurant.image, restaurant, like with this.props.restaurant.image, I could just keep it as restaurant.image because I copied this over into here. So that's pretty cool, I think. But just a tip, you might see this sometimes. So this .props.restaurant.
With the in another way, it's better than this. It's clean.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. Follow what, it depends. It depends. I like this. Not necessary to declare more stuff, but you might see that. Name, rating, and we're not actually showing the rating, showing the cost. We could show the cost and the cuisines. Okay. Dot join the space. Great. Okay. And let's see how we're doing here. We need to export this too. Export default restaurant. And are we using it? Are we importing it over here? Nope. So we'll need to import that too. Import restaurant. Ooh, that's not going to work very well. So you see, I have a restaurant function restaurant here. I'm actually, and this is restaurant and that's restaurant. That's not going to work well. I'm going to actually revert this back to app. Okay, and put export this as app. Make a couple small, make a couple small little changes here, and then over here fix this. Yeah, okay, so that's good. Okay, so let's take a look at where we are. I've got some loading problems here. It's actually frozen. Okay, let's try a different tab. There we go. Looks pretty terrible. All the information's there. So I'm just going to take a quick peek at the, so it goes LI, UL. It's breaking for some reason. I think my styles are not correct, are not very good here. Well, I think that has to do with the CSS that I have for here. It's on UL. Yeah, it's on UL, and it should probably be on just the first UL. Just ignore that. Just ignore that. But yeah, you'd probably want to fix up your styles here to get this done correctly, but I'm not going to take that sort of time here. We've got a lot of stuff to cover, but everything is there. These should just be below. That's it. CSS that's causing the problem. What else do we have? The last piece that I would do is I would want to separate these into different categories like I showed you yesterday. Okay, I think, was that part of it? Grouped using similar headers. Yeah. So we're going to use a combination of filter and map to break these down. And that is based on these ratings, right? So we actually don't need to pass through the ratings or use these ratings directly. We're going to do it by putting different categories, okay? So I'm going to do a restaurant. So here, I'm going to say great, sorry, we'll do an H2 tag. We'll say great restaurants. So these will be restaurants with a high rating. So how do I only select the restaurants with a high rating?
Rating.
Sorry, say that again.
Filter the rating.
Filter with restaurant rating low or high, medium.
Yeah. So how do I limit those? How do I limit myself to that? So right now, I'm getting all the restaurants. How do I limit it to only get high rated restaurants?
Contain.
Filter.
Filter. Okay. So we're just going to add a filter onto here. Okay. And then follow that up with the same map. So what we're doing here is that adding this filter, and obviously we're going to put some stuff in here. Adding this filter allows us to reduce the size of the array that we're dealing with to only contain the ones that we want. So instead of looping over all of them with map, we're going to loop over a subset of them, okay? And we have to choose what that subset is going to be. And that subset is going to be restaurant, and that's going to be restaurant dot rating equals high. So anything with a high rating will get kept with this filter, and with that, those are the ones that we're going to map over. So if we go back over here, I can't even close this tab. Only the high restaurants are filtered into there. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing with medium restaurants. And we're going to do the same thing with the crappy restaurants. Okay. And we're going to say medium. And we're going to say low. So medium and low. Now, these headers are going to appear even when we don't have any restaurants that are in that category, which is not ideal, right? You should probably only want those to appear, for example, when you have restaurants in that category. For example, I don't have any not so great restaurants here, right? So there's a special way to do that, and it's pretty interesting. One of the ways is so this is one of the main ways to do it. You will do this type of syntax, okay? Put in that filter. You ask for the length. If it's greater than 0, you output this. Okay, so it goes, so this is something that you will need to do, unfortunately. Okay, not tonight, but in the future. And you'll end up with this. You see, great restaurants, medium restaurants, and then it doesn't say anything. Because, so the way this works is we're doing this filter, we're checking to see how many restaurants. I mean, it doesn't have to be filter, it could be any variety of other methods of asking, are there any of these types of restaurants? Okay, so we could have done any. Any is is it any? I can't remember in JavaScript what it is. There's a specific method that you're essentially saying, are there any, even just one element that matches this? But filter works too, okay? And what we're essentially doing on the left-hand side here, find works too, Yes, find works too. There's a variety. So like, actually, I was thinking array prototype. We'll go to math, but then we'll, once we hit this, we'll see the of concat from fail find. Every includes, right? Whether an array includes a certain value. Yeah, find works too. Yeah. I thought there's a more generic one. I guess not JavaScript. Yeah, so what essentially we're doing here on the left-hand side is we're putting in a true or false. Okay, so that's what we want. We want a true or false. True means, right, we know this, when we write an if statement, right, when we write an if statement, if we use ampersand ampersand to separate two things, true and false. What is the value of this together?
True.
False.
False.
Oh, sorry.
False. Okay, false. True and false.
False.
Anything and false. Now, when we do it like this, what happens is something called a short circuit. Okay. JavaScript looks at this value and looks at this ampersand and says, okay, so you're checking to see if this is going to be true or false, but the only way that this is possible for it to be true is if this was also true. Since this is false, there is absolutely no way that this statement can be true. Therefore, I won't even look at this. That's what's happening. Okay, short circuiting. Okay, don't execute this because this is false. So don't even waste your time. So we're leveraging that concept and we're saying, put a value over here that evaluates to a Boolean. If it's false, it will not run this piece of code. If it's true, it will run this piece of code. But this does not return true or false. And even if it did, it doesn't matter because we're not doing anything with it anyways. So if there are restaurants that have the low rating, output the header. Otherwise, it won't because this is false and this just won't get run. And then perform this. The UL will still be there, but we can also fix that. We can actually probably put a brace around this whole thing. I'm going to take a guess if we can do that. Ooh, it does not like that. No, still doesn't like it. Okay, I'm gonna have to double check on that one. How we could do multiple lines things, but that's fine. Okay, so we get an application that only shows restaurants when we have restaurants in them. So if I change one of these to low, now it shows up not so great restaurants and it shows the restaurant itself. Okay. And there you have it. Any questions? We're going to do this again, so don't worry. Okay, I just want to show you that. That was not something I would expect you to do, and I actually would have done it for all of these. Okay, not something I would expect you to do, but definitely something that's useful and that we're going to have to do. Okay, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of little weird things like that in React that we have to learn, like this map filter thing, right? Again, it's just JavaScript, and it's really important for us to understand how JavaScript works so that way we can perform things like this. But at the end of the day, I hope you look at this and it makes sense. Like, oh yeah, filter returns an array. Map returns an array. So I'm operating on this, I'm mapping the contents of this array. So that whole concept of things returning and returning an array, limiting the values, right? Producing what we need. Are there any questions?
This is not a question. I just wanted to check and clear something. So
Okay.
each of this app.js needs only one function, right?
All of them need only one function.
Oh, yes. So yes, so each tab of these open code, they need only one function because
They need only one, but that doesn't mean that you only should put one.
So I was wondering for the building part, since the filter map is kind of like looping, maybe is there a way that we could use another function outside of that app function? And
Well, like these guys here, yeah, actually what you could do is you can actually do another component. Because this is really this and this and this, it's starting to look like a little bit of a component. I might say something like this. Let's pretend this exists. That, we'll do something like this, and we'll do this 3 times. Or better yet, if you had this, you can say, yeah. Okay. So you could do this, okay? You could do this. So restaurants. We're going to pass in some restaurants, but we're only going to pass in the restaurants we care about. And like, so no, I don't think so could you? Yeah, I don't think this would be the right piece to put a filter, another function, because there is a difference here. But yeah, you could, if you wanted to, you can write another function. Right? But then you're only removing this part. You're only moving this part. You still need this map in here because you need to convert it to JSX. Actually, no, you don't need to convert your JSX in here. You can use JSX anywhere. So you can do this. You also need your restaurants. We can move restaurants out. If I wanted to. This, so this is what we end up with. So forget about this component stuff here. We need to return this. And it's still happy. Does that make sense? So now we're just doing.
What I was wondering. Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, we could do that. Actually, that doesn't look too bad. You can use JSX anywhere. You can use JSX anywhere. So it doesn't have to be a super complicated. You can definitely move your stuff into functions. Yeah, for sure. And again, when you're starting to do restaurants by rating, I would probably actually just grab a rating, or grab them all, create an array out of them, figure out how many ratings there are, and loop over that instead of doing it. So like I'm being very brute force about it and assuming that there's 3 ratings. But what if another restaurant came in that was like 1-star rating or like super low or 0, right? No rating. No, rating is never go there, right? Now I have to come in and add a new thing. But if I did this right, I wouldn't have to come in and add a new header and stuff. It would just kind of work. But again, you have to balance. You have to juggle. There's a lot of things to juggle here. In programming, there's a lot of things to juggle. Any other questions? But again, remember, look at what I just did. I moved that const out so it's global, right? I just threw in another function. I called that function. It's just JavaScript, man. Okay, it's all just JavaScript. That's going to be the thing I say every single day for the next 2 weeks. It's all just JavaScript. So we just have to have this and export that and return it. And return JSX. In the end, that's all that has to happen. Same thing over here in these classes. Like, just because it's a class doesn't mean you can't have more functions in it and that you can't have functions that exist outside of it. It's totally fine.
John, about the key, in restaurant there, did you make it just, for example, the key name? Because I read that index is used if we don't have some other numbers we use.
Index is not very good either.
Yes, it's not good.
Yeah, it's not good either because the index is going to change over time as things get removed, and they're going to start becoming out of sync. So that one's not very good either. There is a way that we can create, I mean, we know how to create keys, right? Right. Start with an ID of 0, and all we're going to do is every time we pass another restaurant through to map, we're going to say ID equals, and sorry, this is not ID. It has to be like, let's call it key ID. We have to be careful with the names that we use here because ID means, oh, actually, no, I think ID should be okay because this is a component, not an actual element. And we're going to say ID plus. Right? So I'm incrementing this. So I'm passing it through and I'm incrementing it. So now
in the document, the key should in the map. We change the ID to,
Okay. I wasn't sure. I feel like I did this yesterday and it was okay. And then I can say this.props.key. Okay. And then I do have a problem here. Restaurant key is not a prop. Trying to access it for result. See, it doesn't like key. That's why.
It's not sure. The key is not in here. We can delete the key. Yeah.
And it will add the key to the component itself. Oh, it's pretty smart. Nice. Nice. Cool. Okay, so I didn't know you could do that. That's pretty sweet. Or maybe I did, but I forgot. That's the thing about only doing this twice a year, right? I read all the documentation again and I do it all again. And then like when you don't, that's the thing about programming. When you don't do something for a while, you start to forget all these tiny details. The big pictures, the big things you remember, but the tiny details you forget. And so I'm still kind of shaking off the rust, right? That's cool. So yeah, this is a way we can do it, right? So we're incrementing this ID every time when we create a new element. And so this guarantees a new unique ID. A little bit better than using index of map, because actually if we use the index on map, we call map 3 times. So we would have 3 elements with the same ID on the page, right? because we use it here, and then it restarts at 0 here, and then it restarts at 0 here. So we'd have 3 restaurants with the same key equals 0, key equals 1, key equals 2. So it's not ideal to use this index here. So we don't necessarily want to do that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I think this would be a really good time to take a break. We'll do 15 minutes, come back at like 10 after, 10 after 10. And then we'll start talking about state and events. So now we're going to go into like, so far it hasn't been very interactive. Now we're going to make things that are more interactive and show you how React manages that. Okay. So yeah, let's take 15, come back at 10 after 10, and I'll see you in a bit. What we're going to develop is we're going to develop a way for us to add new people, new contacts to our contacts list, okay, and to remove old contacts, okay? So we're going to be creating a one-page, single-page application that has what appears to be a new page. Have a little link at the bottom that says add a new contact. When we click on that link, it's going to bring us to a new page where we add a new contact. Then once we add a new contact, it's going to bring us back here and show us the contacts. We're also going to add a little search at the top that allows us to search through our contacts. So that's where we're going. Yesterday, all we did was we added contacts, okay? We created components. We created this contact component. We broke it down into categories, and we have the these X's here. Obviously, what do you think is going to happen when we click these X's? We're probably going to be removing these contacts, right? So that's what we're going to be working on today, is removing the contacts, okay? So in order to properly remove, in order to properly do anything interactive in React, we need to add something in called state. The idea that components contain some sort of state. So they are tracking their state, okay? Now their state means what they are displaying, the information that they are displaying. We can add things to their state and display more stuff, or we can remove things from their state and display less stuff. State does not carry over on refreshes though. So it sounds like we're creating the stateful thing where there's data in there, and when we refresh it, we still have that data in there. That's not how it works, okay? It is mainly the state of the component that's being displayed. So right now we don't have any state, and we're going to turn this around, and we're going to give these components some state. Okay, and state is a very complicated thing for new programmers, students to grasp. Okay, there's going to be a lot of questions around this, and that's okay. It's not super complicated, but there's a lot of questions around it and how it works. Okay, so you're going to have to, I'll take it slow, I'll do my best to explain. Okay, but please stop me with any questions. Now, in order to have state, a component must be stateful, which means it must be in this class style. It cannot be in the function style. So we cannot do a function app. Okay, this is called a stateless functional component. It has the word stateless in it, which means it cannot have state. So all of our anytime we want to add state, we have to do it using this class syntax. Now, state is an object. We can add state. There are two main ways to add state. Okay? The way that you're going to see it in the documentation is like this. Okay, so let me just fold this, okay, for a second. Fold that up. So we don't need that anymore. Fold this up. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so the way you're going to see it in the documentation is like this. In a constructor function, okay, constructor, and these are requirements. If you put the word constructor, the constructor function in your class, you have to put these two lines in here. Props, super props. We need to pass props to our super. That's a requirement, okay? Just don't ask, just do, okay? And then we can declare this dot state. Now that is declaring state for this application, for this class. But that's how you're going to see it in the documentation. But the documentation has not yet been updated, okay, with the more concise, easy way of doing this. And that is throw out this constructor altogether. And do it like this. Just out here. Okay. We can do it right here, not inside the constructor function. Whoa. Why is that? Don't show me that. Okay, right outside of here. Now, state must be an object. Okay, it is an object. Okay, like an object like this. Inside that object, I have a key, contacts, that has the value of the array of contacts. Okay, so not much has changed here. One of the things that has changed is now I'm not dealing with contacts anymore, the word contacts, right? I am now dealing with state contacts. So state.contacts, and not just state.contacts, this.state.contacts. This.state.contacts. This because it is part of this app, okay? It's no different than had I put it inside the constructor. I am not putting let or const in front of it, okay? Because it's essentially a, it's not a, I guess it's a static variable, okay? This.state.contacts. So that is how you would add state to a component. So now we're just adding it. We're not even using it yet. We're just adding it. The concept of state is this. If anyone modifies state, i.e. if the program somewhere modify state, the component will re-render. Okay, so let me rephrase that. If this gets modified, so for example, if suddenly down here I say state equals state, let me see, state dot, so let's pretend. This dot state dot contacts 0 dot name now equals Tony Stark. I think it's Captain America, yeah. So something different. This changed state. This automatically forces this entire component to re-render, which means redraw. See? Well, actually, that doesn't prove anything, but okay. So it automatically causes the whole component to re-render, which means in order to add interactivity, what we want to do is create functions where we are modifying this state. So, for example, if I wanted to, the goal here, okay, the goal here of what I'm trying to show you in this particular example is when I click on one of these X's, my goal is to figure out which of these I clicked on, which contact I clicked on, and remove that contact from state. When I remove that contact from state, it will force this component to re-render, and it will have one less contact in state, and it will only render 3 contacts instead of 4, right? Because I removed it from state. Now, this is not something that we do manually through programmatically. Like I can remove a contact like this, right? Delete a contact, save. Oh, hey, look, it's gone, right? We're not doing it like that. We are going to do this through some programming, through some events. So we're going to put in a little event on here. I click on that. When I click on that, it's going to modify state. It's going to filter out one of those contacts. We're going to be left with 3 contacts, and this component will re-render. It will only show 3. So it looks like I deleted it, right? That is our goal. So that's how state works. So state is something that components can have. They don't have to have it. They can have it. And it's essentially what allows us to manage the interactivity for that component, right? If we had a to-do list, for example, and we wanted to track to-dos, those would be in state, inside this state variable. And we would have to-dos. Okay. And we would add our to-dos to this array, and we would remove our to-dos from this array. And every time we add it, this component would re-render. And if we were putting out our to-dos, it would display all the to-dos every time. If we added more to-dos, well, that list would grow. If we remove to-dos, well, that list would shrink, right? But it causes the re-render. And that re-render is where that interactivity appears to come from, right? So it's like this page is reloading all the time as we modify state, okay? Because it's a rerunning render. It's causing a re-render of that component. Not only that component, but obviously the children components as well, because it will cause this to occur again. It'll cause all this stuff to happen again. So it would cause the children components, so for example, contact component to re-render as well. Okay. Now, in order for this to occur, we need to have an event listener, right? I can't, right now I click on this and nothing happens. So if nothing happens, I can't modify this state. So we're going to jump away from state for a few minutes. We're going to come back because I can't show you how to modify state if we don't have a way to modify it. So we don't have an event that's being triggered in which we can modify it. So here is how you can write your event listeners. Okay, and you typically would only have event listeners in a place. So you would typically put your event listener function. So how do I explain this? The function that I'm writing right now is not the event listener itself. It is the function that gets invoked when the event gets triggered, right? I'm not putting my event listener on my app so my app is this whole page, right? I'm not putting my event listener on this whole page. I'm putting my event listener on this little box here. Now, the problem is it's not the event listener itself, but the function that it runs that I want to put in the app. I would usually put the function that it runs at the same place as the state, right? Because this function, so for example, I'm going to write a function. It's going to be called remove contact, right? Here's what's going to happen with my event listener. Once I show you, it'll make more sense. Remove contact. Okay. I need to know which contact to remove from all the contacts. This is what I want to run when this X, I don't have it anymore, when that X is clicked, right? When that X is clicked, I want to run this function. And actually it should look like this. Okay, when this X is clicked, I want to run this function. Make sense? I want to remove the contact. When that X is clicked, I want to remove the contact. Now, I want this function to be in the same place that this state exists. So this function has access to this state, right? Even though this little X does not exist in this component, I still want this function to exist here. Okay. So the way this works is a concept in React. So this is a big thing. Okay. It's called unidirectional data flow. Our data always flows downward from parent components to children components. And we can see that currently happening, right? We provide, this parent component that we're in right now provides data to the contact component, not the other way around. The contact component does not provide data back to the parent component. It is one way. We provide data downwards. So if, for example, app had a parent, we would never push data up. We only push data down. We only push things down. And so, yes, while contacts and all this contacts data exists on app, we are pushing the data, and we're pushing only the data we need. And that's so we often find in React that we put state and we put data up pretty high in our component list. So the data might be used in a component way down here, but it might be declared and stored in state in a very high level parent component, because it might be actually being distributed to multiple components. So we have this concept of a unidirectional data flow. So if we were looking at it as a tree and we had a root, all the data flows down from that root or from that node. Okay, it never flows up. And so we have our state here, and we also have the functions that are going to be modifying the state in the same location. Now, this is the function that we're going to be running when we add our event listeners. So on the click of the X, we're going to run this function. The one piece we don't have is the actual event listener. Okay. So let's actually hook that up first, and then we'll show you how to modify. I'll show you how to modify the state. So the first thing that we're going to want to do to hook up an event listener is we're going to want to pass this function down to contact. So because we essentially want to do this. Down here in contact, on this button here, this is how you add an event listener. So let's just run this function. Run some random function. Okay. So on click, run this function. That is how you add an event listener. Look at the syntax. On capital C, click. On click, run this function. Okay. So we're going to, now we have something that when we click on this X, all of them, we put it on, and that's the beautiful thing. This now applies to all of them because contact, the contact component is really each one of these components, right? So this is how we add an event listener. The problem is we don't have access to, we want to run this function, right? But we don't have access to it. I can't see that function from here. I can't say, contact doesn't even know what its parents are because it could have any parents. The whole idea behind a component is that they're loosely coupled. They don't need to know about their parents, right? I can't go and say, actually go run app.remove contact. I can't do that. That's not how we do things. Just like we don't say app.state.character.name, right? We don't say that. We pass the data that we need down to the components through props. And that doesn't just mean properties. That means anything. Remember, props, character is not a property. Character is an object. We could pass just a string. We could pass just a number. We can pass an object. We can even provide functions. And so that's what we're going to do. We are going to provide these contacts with the function to run, with this function. So I'm putting the word on remove contact. So this is going to be the name of the prop I pass through. And I am going to pass through this function. It doesn't have to be on remove contact. That is just a convention you'll see. I like how that naming convention is. Okay. So now now inside contact, it has access to that function through props. Props dot on remove contact. This is a function, right? This is the function from over here. So now I'm saying, when you click on this, run this. And it's not remove contact, it's this dot remove contact because we are operating inside of an object. So this remove contact is a method. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to click, 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 click. So you see all of them, we are passing this function, this method, down to our contact component using props. So we're passing the entire character and we're passing the function as well. The other thing I needed to do was I needed to add the key. And that is contact.id. I threw an ID on there. Get rid of that problem over there. Okay. Questions are?
Sir, I got a question. So in this case, you just add the event listener on that button. So what if the event listener is on a bigger div and you want to target to some smaller things inside it? Like
well, you put it on the thing.
EDAR target something.
You can, but you don't need to, because in this case, unlike how we did it in JavaScript, we are not doing a delegate, right? The reason why we needed to do e.target in JavaScript is because we're doing a delegate. We're delegating things, right? We're only putting one event listener on an entire list. But the way it works in React is different. We put it on the element that we care about clicking. So we don't need to check that e.target we don't need to care about e.target as much. We still have access to e.target. Actually, in this case, this is event, and we can console log e.target. Okay, we can still take a look at it. See? So we can still access it if we cared, but we don't really. We put on click in this case. In React, we put the on click on the element that we care about that the clicks happen. So if we cared about the clicks happening on the LI, we put it over here. And now it doesn't even matter if I click on here. It is happening on this LI. Even if so I moved it to the LI, I saved it. Even if I click on this image or this div or this LI or this X, this is all still considered part of the LI. The target is different, but the event is still, the way that events bubble, it's still triggering. Unlike when we're delegating the event, it's different. The way that event delegation works, it's different. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, it's complicated because we really have to have to answer that question. You have to have a really strong understanding of event bubbling, which we covered, but like I don't necessarily expect you to have a super in-depth, strong knowledge of that, and super in-depth, strong knowledge of how delegation works and how this is different, right? But yeah, you don't need to check that in this case because we end up putting it on the element that we care about. And so this concept of checking e.target to make sure it's the right element isn't going to happen as much. Like, it's going to happen very rarely. In this course, you're not going to need to do that at all.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay. So now the question is, the other question is, how do we get the contact information, right? Like, which contact are we removing, right? If you look over here, I already started building it like remove contact, contact. Well, where am I getting the contact from? How is this, what is this contact? I just showed you that this is event. This is e.target. And is there anything over here that makes it seem like I don't need this? Oh, I guess I could put that there too. Is there anything over here that makes it seem like I I might have a target, like maybe a data attribute, an ID, something like what? How do I,
No key.
Yeah, using your key.
there's an ID. There's an ID, okay. Right, but remember I put the key up here. And this is where things get interesting. Okay. So I actually don't want the key. I want the whole object. Okay, I want the whole object. Personally, I want the whole object. You can take the ID too. There's a variety of things you can take. It's really up to you. But here's what we're not doing. We are not reaching back into the DOM to get that stuff. Like in previous examples, we would go into the DOM, we would put data attributes on there, we would pull that information from the data attributes. Oh, which one did I click? Go look at the data attributes. Data attribute ID. Okay, I clicked on the 5th one. That's the one I got to remove. We're not doing that anymore. Okay. Instead, what we're doing is we have access to this entire object, props.character, right? Props.character is the contact object. I mean, I called it character. I don't know why I called it character. It should have been called contact. That's really bad of me. So we can call it contact. So I'm just going to change that real quick. So props.contact is the entire contact, is that contact object. Right? Right? Okay, cool. So I need to return that over here. So I can do this, right? You're all nodding your head. I know you think I can do this. Can I really do this?
I don't think so.
Why can I not do this?
It just seems that you're running it instantly, not.
I'm just like, I'm trolling you here. You can't do this because I don't want to put parentheses on this. As soon as I put, there's a big difference between this and this, right? And we know this. I've gone over this 1,000 times with you. What is the difference between this with parentheses and this without parentheses?
Well, without parentheses, you are sending a function. With parentheses, you are executing the function.
And if I put parentheses on it, it invokes the function immediately. It doesn't invoke it on click. It invokes it when it's parsing the JavaScript. And it replaces this with whatever the function returns. What does that function return? Nothing. Do I want to call undefined on click? No. So I have a problem. I cannot specify, as soon as I put parentheses on it and I say what I want to pass as the parameter, props.contact, I'm invoking it. And the same thing happens. What does this return? Undefined. Okay. So as JavaScript parses it, it runs that function. It says, okay, on click, I'm ready to do this. Undefined. Right? I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Remember,
you can create a function that returns a function if you want.
And that's what we do. We need to put a function that runs a function. Okay, so this function does this. So this is the equivalent of doing an anonymous inline function, right? It doesn't run high immediately. It runs high when we click it, correct? And I can just turn this into an arrow function if I wanted to. Same thing. It doesn't run high immediately. It runs high when I click it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to replace console log high with so it doesn't, again, same thing. It doesn't run this when I immediately, it runs it when I click it. And now I can safely put my parentheses on it and pass whatever the heck I want. That is how we do it. When we need to pass custom data back to when we need to put parentheses, because we need to put custom data, and this applies not only in React, this applies in JavaScript as well. I've dealt with a couple of you on this issue exactly. A couple of you have tried doing these things, and you fail because you forget that you have to put it in a function, in an anonymous function. So,
sorry, John.
Yeah.
In the contact.js, it contact this not in this function should unremote contact. No.
Oh, yeah. Unremote contact. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and it's not this dot props, it's just props because I'm using a functional component. This component is only functional. It has no state, right? It itself has no state. It's its parent that manages the state because the data flows down, right? So we have our onClick event, which is going to call this function, and we can console log that contact. So let's take a look at that. Beautiful. Right? So we're passing down our method using props. And again, I called it on remove. You can call it whatever the heck you want. You want to call it func1, you can call it func1. Doesn't matter. Okay.
We need to use a good name because
yes, yeah. You need to use a good name. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is this is not a rule in React. Like it will work. If you called it remove contact, that would work, right? I'm just trying to demonstrate like it doesn't matter. It's open. Now, yes, you should use good naming, of course. Absolutely. All the time. Goes without saying at this point. But just like this parameter, you can call anything you want. It's just a parameter. Okay, so I'm passing the entire contact back. Now, now I can modify the state. Okay. So keep all the, I can't use contact and contact, so I can't call, so I'm using C instead of contact. Could be, we could call it state contact for the contact that's in state. So we're checking, because we have this entire object, we can actually compare the objects, right? So I can compare this object that I'm getting from when I click on this to the object that's in state. because they're actually the same objects. Remember, when we compare arrays and objects and things in JavaScript, the only time they're equal is if they are the same one. Well, guess what? This is the same as at least one of the contacts in here. We just have to figure out which one it is. And we're going to filter it out. So we're going to take out all the contacts. We're going to keep all the contacts except for the one that matches the contact that we're passing in, that we want to remove, right? So not equal to. So filter, right? This dot state, yes.
State is an object. Yeah, it must be context.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So state is an object. You can't filter objects. You have to filter. So I need to replace this with this. Okay. Now let's see how this works. Cannot read property contacts of undefined. Oh, yeah. Right, okay, so I'm intentionally doing a bunch of things wrong here because I want to show you stuff. And I just forgot that I did this wrong and I have to show you. Okay, so this dot state is undefined. Show that to you. Here. Prove it. I'll prove it to you. This dot state is undefined. Click, and we get that big fat thing. But this is the key here. Undefined, line 40. Line 40, this dot state undefined. Why? Why is this undefined? I'll give you a tip. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with how this is managed. This. What is the value of this?
Remove contact.
Remove this because the state is a global.
It is this. Props. Right? Whatever is to the left of on remove contact, because that's how I'm calling this function, right? Remember, when we use functions like this, it's based on how it was called. So it's going to change. It's going to be dynamic. But we don't want it to be dynamic. So the documentation is going to say something about, oh yeah, in that, if you're using that constructor, right? Let me pop over to the React documentation because I'm going to refer to it a couple times because I want to show you some differences between what I do and what you're going to read. Both of them are perfectly fine. It's just that you have to remember which approach that you're taking because you're going to have to be consistent. Okay. So I give you, today you're reading Advanced Guides, Main Concepts, State and Life Cycle. Don't worry about the life cycle stuff today. You can pretty much skip over that. Okay. Adding local state to class. Okay. So you're going to see them say, here is your constructor, right? If we say constructor and we want to add state, we have to say super props. The other thing you might want to do, they're going to say, is down here, boom, boom. Sorry. Do they have bind in here? Bind. Bind. Oh, they don't. Handling events. Down here. They're going to say to do, and you're also reading handling events. This dot handle click equals, so it looks like this. Okay.
And John, in the reading, they used set states in order.
Yeah. Don't ruin the surprise, Harris.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, I'm doing things intentionally wrong, so that way I can demonstrate some other stuff. And this is one of the things, but I'll get to set state right away. Okay, so if you choose to do a constructor, one of the things you have to do is super.props. You have to do the set state. But if you want to fix this type of, if you want to fix this type of function so that way you can access this dot set state, you have to control this inside of it, which means you need to do something like this. This dot handle click bind this. Here is what I say. I say, forget about this. We're not using that. And we're not going to use this type of function. Instead, we're going to use a function that allows us to control state by doing this type of function. Okay. So arrow functions deal, now you'll have to go back into your reading, but you'll have to trust into your previous lessons on JavaScript, but you'll have to trust me. The difference between arrow functions and regular functions, function declarations, is that arrow functions inherit this from their surrounding context, not from how they were invoked. And so the surrounding context means that this is the same as whatever this is out here. And this is app. So therefore, it stands to reason that this dot state is this state. Now, if you didn't get all that, get this. Please just write your functions as arrow functions, and you won't have this problem. I repeat, just write your functions as arrow functions, and you won't have this problem. You can even do your render as an arrow function. Can't you? Yeah. Write it correctly. Okay. Now, let's take a look and see if turning it from a function declaration into an arrow function has fixed my state issue. Because before it was undefined. All I did was I turned it into an arrow function. That's it. Now, this dot state should be this whole freaking state object thing. Ah, there we are. And you can see it started as, let's refresh this. I click on it, bonk. It starts at 4, but then I end up removing that one object. If I click this again, it doesn't remove anything because that one's already gone. And then you're going to say, but John, you told me that when I modify state, it re-renders the page, right? I did say that, right? When I modify state, it should re-render this component and all the children components. And obviously I modified state and it didn't do anything, okay? And that goes back to one of the principal tenets of React. Other than unidirectional data flow, and dealing with, so unidirectional data flows down, okay? And coupling of components, right? Tight coupling, right? We want loosely coupled things, okay? And so we're going to state and lifecycle down here. There is this big warning. Do not modify state directly. This will not re-render a component. Wrong. This dot state dot blah equals blah. And that is exactly what I'm doing. This dot state dot blah equals blah. That is not how we do it. Instead, React provides us with 2 ways to modify state, 2 safe ways. The reason why we can't modify state directly is because we cannot trust the state that state is in. because the way that React works under the hood, it can modify state in batches. So it may batch things up. So what we think we're dealing with here may not actually be what we're really dealing with. And so we need to use the tools that they provide. Okay, they're essentially saying, don't trust what you think it is. Don't trust what you think it is. Instead, just use the tool and you can trust that the tool will manage it for you correctly. Okay, so the tool is this. So we use something called set state. And there are two ways of dealing with set state. Okay, one is the straight up way. We just give it the object, the new object that we want, like this. Okay. And it will merge, it will replace the old object and merge anything else. For example, if I had other things in here, like to-dos, and to-dos had stuff in it, and I said, and I showed it, I'm only replacing contacts. Here's the new contacts object. Here's the new state. It would not destroy anything I had in to-dos. Okay, although I'm not copying over to-dos, it would not destroy the things I have in to-dos. Okay, it merges it safely. So if I look at the state after, to-dos is still safe. Contacts has been changed. Okay, so let's take a look at that. See, to-dos is still there, an array of 3. Contacts has been changed. And look, my stuff is updating. Okay. But we have one more problem here. And that is, I just said you cannot trust this .state. And so there's 2 methods that it provides. It provides this one, where it's not a function, we just give it a new object and it merges the 2, or this one. Where we are creating our new state from our previous state, which is exactly what we're doing right here. This .state, we're using the previous state to generate the next state. We need to take, so this is actually the one we want. We want to, so whatever we return to this function is going to be what gets merged in. So we want to return an object, and we want to return this object. Except we don't want to use this .state, we want to use previous state. We can trust previous state. We cannot trust this .state in here because we don't know what it's necessarily going to be. And so we use previous state.contacts.filter instead of state, this .state. We never want to use this .state in here. Okay? It's okay to use this .state in here, right? This .state. We can trust it in the render, but we can't trust it when we're modifying state. We want to make sure we have a clean, truthful state. And this is the only thing that we can trust. Okay? Think of it as a spy. We can't trust it. Okay? This is the only one we can trust, previous state. So if we need to generate the next state based on the previous state, we need to use this. If we don't care about what the previous state was, we can do the other. So this is called the functional set state. If we don't care about what the previous state was, we can use just this set state, which is just we pass in a new object. Okay, and it just replaces it. And we save this, and we're done. bang, bang. There you go. So by the time we're done, state is, contacts is empty. Now, this is a heavy lesson. In addition to this, there's another big piece here. Another big restriction. Not only can you not modify state directly, but when you are modifying state, you can't modify any of the objects directly. So what does that mean? That means that let's pretend instead, when I click X, let's pretend, instead of removing it, let's do something crazy. Instead of removing it, what I'm gonna flip them from good guy to bad guy. So if they were a good guy, they're now going to be a bad guy. If they're a bad guy, they're now going to be a good guy. So it'll just flip them from one list to the other. Okay, that's all it's going to do. Every time I click it, it's going to do the opposite. Okay. Now, this one is actually a lot more complicated because of what I just said. This is a very loaded statement. Not only can you not modify state directly, you have to use this .set state, but you're not allowed to directly change objects inside of state. So which means what you think I might be able to do, is this. Go find the contact. So we could say, how do I, find the contact where, right? So this is a function, right? You can also write it as an arrow function. So you'll see that. So you might see different types of this set state being written. So I'll write it as an arrow function. Yes.
Where is previous state declared? Like, how does React know that previous state dot contacts is actually referring to our previous state?
It's providing this to me. This function is something it provides to me, and so it's going to provide me with this. I can call this anything I want, right? This is like the same thing as like a for each, right? Where I get to declare the function inside for each, and I call this whatever I want. Or it's the same thing as map, right? I can call this whatever I want. I can call this whatever I want. Map provides the contact. React provides the state.
So
Okay.
it was like built in within the set state method, which points to this
The
dot
previous state.
right? Okay.
Yeah, it's a callback. I provide the callback. It provides me with the information that will fill the callback. Yeah, so I can call this whatever I want. I just usually call it previous stage or previous state or previous stage or something. Yeah. Now I'm going to use an arrow function in this case instead of a regular function, but whatever, it doesn't matter. So in this case, I'm going to do something a little bit more complicated. I'm going to go find the previous contact. Okay. And then I'm going to say previous state dot contacts. So I want to go find the previous contact, and I'm updating it, right? We're changing it from good guy to bad guy, right? So I'm going to say previous state dot contacts fine. So I'm going to end up with a contact. We're going to say contact dot type equals, so if contact type equals bad guy, so sorry, contact type equals contact type, this is a ternary, equals bad guy, then he's a good guy. Otherwise, he's a bad guy, so we'll make him a bad guy. Okay, and then we're just going to return previous state.contacts.
The variable name seems to be Same with the parameter.
Oh, that's going to be a problem. Let's just make this C. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go find the contact. I'm going to change his type, and then I'm going to just set state to this updated contact. So essentially, I change this to good guy, and I take this whole thing and I set the previous state. I set the new state to whatever the previous state was with that change that I made, right? So this is how it'll look. Refresh. Dook. If c.type is bad guy, c.type equals good guy. Return contacts, previous state contacts. That should change it, but it doesn't matter because this is wrong anyways. Okay, at the end of the day, this is wrong. Here's the problem. I mentioned that you are not allowed to directly change these things in state. Okay, instead, you have to create copies of everything and change those copies. In our case, before, let's go back to what we had before. Filter creates a copy of this array and all the objects in it. It creates a copy of it. Okay? And so you're going to find yourself wanting to do things that create copies, map, filter, things of that nature. Or you might see people use object.assign, okay? But the way I like to do it is if I wanted to modify this particular type of each individual person, I would say this. So I'm going to go back and do an arrow function here just for fun so you can see how that looks. Okay. And contacts is going to be previous state contacts. Find. Filter, we're going to, no, we're not going to, we're going to find the previous contact. So we're actually going to do the same thing that we were doing before. So we're going to say const C equals previous state contact find. And we're going to find the contact that is the same as this contact that we're passing in. So we'll have something with C. Then the new state that we're going to create is going to be a new object. So we could say previous state.contact, a new object. Contacts is going to be previous state.contacts. And shit. See how complicated this gets? I'm even confusing myself. So we need to do, yeah, so we get the new contact and then here, C equals, as this is such a pain in the butt, but this is actually how it has to be done.
You put the C as const, not light.
That's fine. That's fine. I don't actually need to do this. I need to do this .C, comma, type, and we need to set the new type. I'm just going to force it to good guy for this example. This creates a copy. Okay, this creates a copy of this object and it replaces any of the properties in this object with this. So this object C might have had a type bad guy. This creates the copy and then replaces that with good guy. So this object is actually a completely new object to this object, even though, so it's built from this object, C, but it's a totally new object. And now we need to filter out the old one and replace it with the new one. No joke. new object. Okay. You will get used to doing stuff like this in React because this is how you have to do it. So here's what I did. I got the old object. I made a clone of it. I changed the one thing that I needed to change when at the same time I made the clone. I removed the old object from the stuff, and then I added the new object as a replacement. That is just what happened. Okay, and so technically if I click on this guy, it should just break this.state.context.filter. This.state.context.filter. Where do you see that? Is not a function. Yes, I've got an error somewhere in here. Previous state, context filter. Go remove that one and add.
This filter create array, and you can.
Oh yeah, this is an array. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. And I created an object. There we go. There we go. Okay, so remember this spread operator, okay, ... This takes something and essentially explodes it. So it takes all the properties from C, ID, name, email, avatar, type, and explodes it out into a brand new object, assuming you put it inside an object. If you put it inside an array, it will explode all the stuff inside the previous array. So all the objects, it explodes out. So because remember, filter returns an array. So it explodes all the elements of that array out. And I put that inside of an array. So it creates a new array, brand new clone of the array. And then I put this new one back in. I am like not joking. It is crazy the amount of work that you have to do when you need to modify children. I've included a little piece in the reading of the different ways that you need to do this on Stack Overflow. There's pretty much 3 approaches, but about how you need to modify different objects when you're dealing with it. Okay, so this is how you want to approach it. You will have to do this. You don't have to do this tonight for your exercise, don't worry, but I want to show you. I'm going to show you again tomorrow, and I'm going to show you again on Monday. Tomorrow's Thursday. I'll show you again tomorrow. I'll show you again on Friday. So we're going to do this at least three times. I'm going to show you 3 times before I actually ask you to do it. And then I'm going to ask you to do it. And then and then it's probably going to show up on your assignment. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Joe?
Yeah.
For line 43, I just wonder, since filter already created new array, so what's the reason for use the 3 dots to clone it again?
Oh, it's just easier to add it. You can also do concat here, because yes, you're right. Previous already does create a new array, and then you can do a push of new object onto that array if you wanted to. That's fine. You can do a variety of ways, right? The 3 objects is fine to be very easy, right? I need to get this new object that I created onto that array. So essentially, the way you can think about it is I went to go find Ultron. That's line 41. Go find Ultron. Create a clone of Ultron, line 42. Replace type with the new type that you want. And obviously, if I wanted to actually flip them back and forth, I need to do some logic here, an if-else statement. If the type is good guy, put good guy. If the type is bad guy, put bad guy. Or good guy, right? Flip them. But I'm not. I'm just hard coding it for an example. So line 42 clones this and replaces this type. Line 43 sets the new state. Uses the previous state, filters out this one. Okay. And then pushes on the clone. Now, yeah, it could have been push, it could have been triple dots, it can be concat, I think, too. I think. Yeah, concat works as well. Okay, and it shouldn't be double equals, it should be triple equals. Okay. This is how we create interactive. So that the whole concept of not being able to actually directly modify state is a huge, huge pain in the butt. But it's something, if you wrote this every day, you get used to it, because there's only so many different ways that you modify objects, and you really get used to it. Like you're gonna do this 5 different ways, and then once you do it the 5 different ways, you're just gonna be repeating the same process. Oh, it's an object inside an object. Okay, I have to go find it, do this, boom. Or in the first way, it's really easy. I just did filter, right? So sometimes it's really easy, sometimes it's a little more difficult, but there's only so many ways that you need to do it. And this is the really big pain in the butt, but again, once you figure it out, it's pretty simple. Okay, it took me a couple, I hesitated a little bit. It's been a while since I did this, so you'll have to forgive me, but okay. So that is set state. Again, you're not gonna be doing it like this. You're gonna be doing a much easier way, probably just filter. And actually, if you do it with an arrow function, you can do this in a 1 line. Set state, doop. If you do an arrow function, by the way, like this, you have to put parentheses around it, because if you don't, it interprets this object as braces for a function like this, and you don't want that. So you have to put parentheses. There's tons and tons of teeny tiny little tricks here. Okay. It says it doesn't like it. Unexpected comma. Contacts, previous state, filter.
You need
This
one
is
more parenthesis in line 40 at the end.
One more.
One more.
One more here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you. I don't have my color. Oh yeah, I never added my colored brackets on here. That'd probably help. Okay. So there you have it. Questions. I know it's a tough one, right? So the best way that you can do this is by just doing it. So tonight, a little bit different of an exercise, okay? This is the hardest thing in this course, okay? Today's lesson is the hardest thing in this course. This is what students always get stumped on. I mean, there's a lot of little things and a lot of little, like, when they say you have to have some experience in JavaScript, it helps if you know JavaScript well when you're doing React, because of all these little things. You really have to know, what does this return? What does this do? How does this work, right? How are these brackets working? And if you only have a vague understanding of JavaScript, you're in trouble, right? So tonight's exercise is pretty straightforward, okay? Because I want you to really focus on certain things. So it is exercise number 3. You will be creating a new React application, a super simple application that will allow users to push a button and generate a new circle with a random background color and a random number placed inside it. You can see a demo of it here. Single button. Click, 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 click. Okay, so think about this. A button, a component with an event listener. On click, generate a new button. What does it mean to generate a new button? We start with this dot state being empty, no values in it. And then when we click a button, we generate a random number and we put that into state. Okay, we're also generating a random color. So it's actually not just a number, it's a object. And the object contains the number and the color.
Hey, John.
Okay. Yeah.
I saw too on your demo, if you click on them, they go away. Is that something you want us to do for the exercise?
Yep.
Okay.
Did I not say that in there? It doesn't say that? Oh,
No.
yeah. Okay, sorry. Yes. Allows users to click a button, and you can see. So when you click on, when a user clicks on a circle, it will remove that circle. Okay. So yeah, that's the other piece. Sorry, thank you. So when you add new circles, when you click on it, it removes that circle. That's it. That's the whole thing. So a couple little things that you need to remember. So you should have at least two components. I called them boxes because they were boxes before, but I just put a border radius, so now they're circles. It could be a circle component and circles component, right? Or something. You should have at least two components, right? One that represents this whole page and then one that represents each circle. A few things to remember. You can steal some of my markup and some of my CSS if you want directly from this demo page, right? Inspect, console, right? You can see the markup that I'm using. So you can see what a button looks like, what sort of classes it has, where I add the style. Okay, you can also steal my CSS if you wanted to. Okay, it's all in here. It's all there. Can you steal my, you can also see my stuff. Don't go steal my stuff, okay? You could go ahead and steal it if you want, but you're gonna be losing out on the whole learning experience, right? Why build it when you could just steal it, right? The whole point of this is to practice. So yeah, you can go steal my CSS if you want, okay? Or you can try building it yourself. It's really just a div with a width on it and a heavy 50% border radius and a random color. That's all it is. A couple shadows and some other silly things. Just playing around. Remember, you cannot modify the state directly. Do not modify state directly. Use the set state function. I highly recommend you make your functions arrow functions. Otherwise, you might have an issue with this. Okay, remember that each individual circle needs a key. So make sure you add one, figure out a way to add one. And you will need to write a function to generate a random color. You can use this one if you want. Boom, there you go. Okay, you should also write a function to generate a random number. I'll leave that up to you. So the set state that you're doing here is going to be very easy. You're either filtering out one or you're adding one. So you don't have to do that crazy set state that I showed you at the end. You can do a simple set state like this. In this case, I'm filtering, but in other cases, you might just be pushing. Or actually, no, you're going to have to do this. Sorry, you will have to do this. Previous state, comma. But you can concat. Yeah, you can concat. You can push. You can do that too. Yeah, sorry, you could just, it could be very simple. It can be very simple. I don't mean to confuse you. Give it a shot. Try your best. Get those event listeners working. See how far you can get. Obviously, I'm going to cover this tomorrow in great detail. Answer all your questions, but don't take that as an opportunity to not do it. Trust me. Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns? Zach says he loves React, so throw all of your React questions his way. I'm online too. Feel free to shoot me a question or two, and I'll do my best to respond. Okay. All right. best of luck this afternoon. Obviously, I'm here if you need me. Have a good one, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, Thursday at 8:45. See ya.